netizens have accused CNA of conducting psychological operations against voters after it published a report framing far-right extremism as a growing threat to Singapore's national security and multiracial harmony. Citing experts, the report warned that far-right extremism, like Islamic extremism, poses a serious challenge to Singapore's social fabric. Analysts proposed adapting existing counter-radicalization frameworks to tackle this threat. In its latest terrorism threat assessment, Singapore's Internal Security Department flagged far-right extremism as a fast-evolving danger in the US, Canada, Australia, and Europe. The ideology encompasses exclusivist beliefs that justify violence to preserve ethnic purity or achieve political aims. Often associated with white supremacy, far-right extremism also includes broader forms of ethno-religious chauvinism, nationalism, and nativism. In the US, white Christian nationalism, an ideology blending racial and religious dominance, has gained momentum amid Donald Trump's political resurgence. White Christian nationalism promotes white supremacist assumptions about the superiority of white Christian culture and its traditional way of life, wrote Professor Kumar Ramakrishna, Dean of the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, in a commentary. Experts say far-right ideologies, once viewed as a Western issue, are now gaining traction globally, including in Southeast Asia. In Singapore, at least 3 far-right cases have surfaced. Analysts caution that these may be just the tip of the iceberg. As such, radicalization often goes undetected. Far-right ideology directly contradicts Singapore's secular, meritocratic principles, said Professor Ramakrishna. It promotes the belief that majority groups must remain dominant and never be replaced. The ISD warned these ideologies could be localized to exploit societal fault lines, pushing us versus them narratives that divide, dehumanize, and incite violence. RSIS senior analyst Kalicharan Veera Singham noted that while Singapore has seen isolated racist incidents, far-right extremism is ideologically motivated and justifies hate. Unlike religious extremism, far-right symbols and language evolve quickly and are harder to detect, especially when adapted to local contexts. No organized far-right groups currently operate in Singapore. Those radicalized so far were influenced online. Professor Rowan Gunaratne, a security expert at RSIS, said thousands of far-right websites and social media accounts globally are spreading propaganda, raising funds, and recruiting. As a digitally open society, Singapore's youth are particularly vulnerable. All identified far-right cases here involved teenagers. The ISD noted that youth may be drawn to the identity, excitement, and rebellious image these ideologies project. Professor Ramakrishna added that anti-establishment messaging may appear cool to disaffected young people. Dr. Muhammad Ali, who leads the Religious Rehabilitation Group, said personal struggles, such as family or school issues, can also make youth more susceptible. Globally, countries are grappling with the rise of far-right extremism. In Singapore, the response involves a whole-of-society approach built on education, social cohesion, and enforcement. More than any other government, Singapore works closely with youth to build social bonds, said Professor Gunaratne. This includes SG Secure, launched in 2016 to strengthen public resilience, and outreach by groups like RRG, which hosts seminars and interfaith dialogues. On the enforcement front, the Internal Security Act allows detention without trial for up to 2 years in cases of national security threats. Since 2001, it has been a key counter-terrorism tool. Professor Gunaratne called the ISA Singapore's most effective law and an indispensable weapon. If the ISA is Singapore's strongest deterrent, rehabilitation is its secret weapon. Authorities are now adapting strategies used in Islamic extremism cases to de-radicalize far-right detainees. The first far-right detainee, a 16-year-old who planned mosque attacks, was rehabilitated with support from educators, mentors, and counselors. Professor Ramakrishna said the radicalization process mirrors that of Islamic extremism, differing mainly in ideology, not method. Dr. Mohammed said lessons from rehabilitating Jamaat Islamiyah members since the early 2000s have shaped evolving approaches, noting that over 90% of JI detainees have been reintegrated. In the first far-right case, the RRG partnered with the National Council of Churches. A Christian pastor counseled the youth, while an RRG member addressed his anti-Islamic views. Dr. Mohammed stressed that rehabilitation is about reform, not retribution. Whether a church or mosque is attacked, Singapore as a whole is affected. It threatens the foundation of our religious harmony, he said. Under CNA's Facebook post, netizens responded critically to the report, accusing the outlet of media bias, fearmongering, and carrying out psychological operations against Singaporeans. One user questioned why the report only highlighted far-right extremism while ignoring far-left extremism. The commenter argued that the perceived rise in extremist attitudes was a direct result of neoliberal economic policies, including what they called the ruling party's open-leg immigration policy. Instead of finding out and addressing the root cause of these shifts in political perceptions, CNA has chosen to do more psyops and fear-mongering to pit different segments of Singaporeans against each other, the user said. Another netizen accused CNA of laying the groundwork for the PAP to label any anti-establishment or opposition-linked sentiment as extremist, referring to the use of terms such as nationalism, chauvinism, and nativism in the article. The user described it as a typical playbook from the PAP. One user commented, "IO talks so much for what lay. Just say anyone other than PAP are extremist LA." The user claimed such fear narratives had been used for decades. One commenter stated that most Singaporeans are far middle and rejected CNA's far-left ideologies. They criticized CNA for seemingly branding everyone to their right as far-right. Some netizens suggested that the timing of the article was politically motivated, linking it to the upcoming general election. They claimed that such pieces tend to surface whenever an election is near, aiming to instill fear, distract voters, and justify continued one-party dominance. One user commented, "So much propaganda from our news outlet prior to election." One user remarked that, nearing GE, all these terrorism articles will pop up out of nowhere, accusing the media of using fear to divide the population and maintain political control. Another echoed this sentiment, saying, "Whenever G's here, we will always see plenty of articles like this." The user described it as a recurring tactic that plays up threats of regional terrorism, political ideologies, and racial division to sway public sentiment and deflect attention from pressing domestic concerns. One user accused the PAP of creating an imaginary enemy and portraying Singapore as being under threat from invisible forces that only the establishment can perceive. Is it that they are afraid of losing big for the incoming G? A different commenter suggested that the ruling PAP government resorts to confusion tactics during elections when it cannot convince voters through its policies. "Please, voters out there, don't lose your attention and vote wisely," the user said.